What's it like to work in professional sports? To rub elbows with guys like Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley? To be a part of several championship teams? To be a senior executive at the leading marketer, promoter, and sponsor of motorsports entertainment in the United States? Stay tuned as we welcome Mike Burch to this week's episode of the Marketing Chief Podcast. Welcome to the Marketing Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Collins. I've been off for a few weeks, but now that summer's over, we're ready to get right back into it with new episodes. If you'd like to watch this episode instead of just listen to it, head over to our website at marketingchiefpodcast.com and click on the Episodes tab, or search for Marketing Chief Podcast on YouTube. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Mike Burch, the Chief Strategy Officer at Speedway Motorsports. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Rob. Great to see you again.
And it's been a long time. So take us through. You have a phenomenal background. Speedway Motorsports, we want to talk about what that is and what that entails. We want to talk about, your background in the NBA with the Magic, where we first met, the Rockets, the Hornets. Like you've been all through that piece. Just tell us a little bit about, give us a snapshot of your background and how you came up through marketing.
Yeah, really have to start going back to Chapel Hill, getting my degree there in economics, and most importantly, I think, and most influentially, had a chance to be a student manager for Dean Smith in the basketball team.
Oh my gosh!
So
wow.
Got a master's degree in leadership and organizational behavior by being in the gym with him every day for 3 or 4 hours a day, and learned so much there. That really ignited the love of sports for me, and seeing that there's more to sports than just rolling out the ball, and seeing ACC basketball and everything that goes into that. Grew up in Pennsylvania, decided to get a master's and went to Georgia Southern, and was able to get a master's in sports administration there, and had to do an internship. And that's what led me to Orlando, was doing an internship with the Magic. And I tell people I got there, and then Shaq got there, and then I left, and he realized there was no point being in Orlando. I'm going to head to LA. So I went from Orlando to Houston with the Rockets. In Orlando, I did a lot of game presentation stuff, cheerleaders and mascots and all that good stuff. And being in the home of Disney, that had a pretty high bar. Went to Houston, the same role. And in my time in Houston was during the Hakeem Olajuwon era, and a couple NBA championships, and helped launch the WNBA and the Houston Comets, and 3 championships there. And one of my proudest accomplishments is that my daughter, who's 20, has grown up in a world where women have always played professional basketball in the United States. So did everything there, but played and coached, and wanted to get closer to home. So I had a chance to come back to Charlotte, work for the Hornets. And then when they left for New Orleans, wanted to stay in Charlotte, and started to work for Speedway Motorsports 18 years ago, starting in the corporate sales department, and working for the son of the founder, Bruton Smith. And they were kind enough to kind of invite me in, and said 18 years later, here I am being a chief strategy officer. That's
what a great journey, number one. Number two, in Orlando during the Shaq and Penny years, in Houston during the Hakeem years. What do you have a ring for every fingernail between Houston and the WNBA? And wow, what a great time. And funny, I think I texted this to you. I'm watching ESPN, and it's a 30 for 30, and they're talking about when Shaq's contract came up for renewal and the Magic didn't renew it, and they're doing the press conference, and there I see Mike Burch walking Shaq into the press room. I'm like, that is so funny,
Yeah, I got a kick out of that. I always point that out to my family, to my kids, when they'll be showing old Rockets Magic finals games, and I'm at the scorer's table, or just pointing myself out in the background of different sporting events. So I've been. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't believe, the opportunities I've had, the people I've had a chance to meet, the experiences I've had. So it's been a pretty good run so far.
It's been a great run. Talk to me a little bit, before we get into Speedway, talk to me a little bit about your NBA experience and the types of things that you did, and what made that part of your career exciting and interesting and rewarding for you.
Well, I knew the basketball side, but I really, you think about it, you're at an NBA game for 48 minutes, or the game is 48 minutes, but you're there for 2.5 hours. So you've got all this other time. So how do you create something beyond just the game? And we think about, sports, and so often what we remember is not who won or who lost, but remember the people we were with and just the feeling that we had there. So I really enjoyed kind of helping to host that party from the time somebody entered the arena to the time they left, thinking about what does that experience look like and feel like, and how do we make sure that that's that person's only time coming to a game, that it's something great. And when you do it 41 times a year, it was really thinking about, well, we've got to go out and give it our best, because we may do this mascot routine 10 times during the year, but this is the only time that this family or this child is going to see this routine. So let's make sure we're always putting our best efforts out there. And you can't control the competition. So it's great when you have a really talented team and you're playing well, but sometimes you're not always blessed with the best game or the best team. And you still got to make it an experience that people want to come and commit their time and commit their money to. So learning about the whole event aspect of it. And then the NBA really was at the forefront of kind of best practices sharing. They created the Teambo department to get teams to kind of, because there really isn't a competition. You have your own geography. So the Magic may have been competing with the Heat on the court, but from a business perspective and from a best practices perspective, there was a great opportunity for everybody to kind of share what we're doing. And I really picked up an appreciation then for, how do you do something the best way, and how do you create an environment where people can share what they've learned as they've gone along.
And do you think, so again, for those who might not know, Pat Williams was really behind the Magic coming to Orlando. He is known as a promoter extraordinaire. I think he invent or was responsible for Phillies Fanatic and that whole program. So how much did his personality and his experience, infuse that energy into the Magic and your time there?
So much. I mean, Pat, again, one of the great promoters and somebody I could still consider a friend and still try to cross paths with at least once a year. And, for a kid who grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, about an hour from Philadelphia, where the 76ers were at their heyday with Dr. J and Moses Malone, Pat Williams was the general manager during those era. So here I am in high school watching these guys, and that was my team. And then to be able to go down and work in the same office as Pat Williams, and Matt Gukas was the head coach there, and he's coaching the Magic at the time. So I'm like just in awe that I'm actually in the same building as these folks. And then Pat was so well known for the promotions that he was a big Bill Veeck believer. And if you haven't read Veeck is in Rec, it's a book I try to read once a year just to kind of go back to my promoter's roots. Pat was always looking for ways to make things fun. And one time he wrestled a bear in Philadelphia at halftime. And so as I was the promotions coordinator, so one of my responsibilities was to book the halftime acts. And I remember going home for Christmas, the first time I had the job, and I'm down in our basement, and I have this stack of videotapes of potential halftime acts. And it's, people who blow themselves up, and guys who, one guy will lay on a table and flip the other guy with his feet, and the woman flipping the bowls into catch them on her head. And my mom walks downstairs. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Mom, this is my job. This is what I do. This is part of what I do. It's like halftime act." I can see her thinking, like, you went to an out-of-state school, you got a master's degree, and you're down here, watching
America's Funniest Videos, which is actually your job, right?
Yeah. So, and Pat would bring me these. He big reader of the National Enquirer. He loved to read. Probably reads 100 books a year if he doesn't write 100 books a year. And he would bring me these articles out of the Enquirer. The woman with the beard of bees or whatever, and like have these things circled and leave them on my desk as potential halftime acts. So he was always somebody who was looking for the next thing. A tremendous speaker. He had behind his desk, he had like a library index card filing system, and he would record quotes and stories, and he would write them and catalog them. So when he was going out to do a speech, if it was going to be on leadership, he'd go to the L section and pull out 10 cards of stories about leadership, and that was his speech. And he just would tell those 10 stories, and that was it. So just had his huge collector. And that was another thing I learned was write things down. Because you build up a library of tools and things that that oftentimes will serve you down the road. You don't know how you're going to apply them. That's really what creativity
Sure.
is in my mind, is taking all these kind of disparate ideas and bringing them together in a new way. And Pat was just a great collector of raw materials, but fantastic guy. Again, had a chance to introduce him to my son several times. And my wife actually worked temporarily for him as his administrative assistant.
Oh,
When his
really? I didn't know
assistant
that.
was on maternity leave. So Pat's been a huge influence and a big part of our family, and one of the people I really feel fortunate to have worked with. And then, too, as a believer, as a Christian, he was really somebody early on. I saw that you can have your Christian belief and still be effective in the workplace, and that's something that's been really foundational to me. Even going back, Coach Smith was a big believer in the work he did in social justice, and made all the freshmen attend some sort of religious service. You didn't have to go to a Christian church, but you had to be somewhere on Sunday morning or Saturday night to kind of grow yourself spiritually. And worked for a guy at Georgia Southern where I got my master's, who was a strong believer. So I've had people of faith throughout my career that have, and those principles have really served me well and been a foundation to what I've done as I've gone through all these different stops.
That's amazing. Grew up a big Florida State fan, big fan of Bobby Bowden, and watched his memorial
his
service.
passing. Yep.
Yeah, but that's what came through, right? You talk about his life. Yes, you talk about the 14 seasons where they were top 4 in the nation for 14 years in a row. But what came out of that service was faith, family, football, in that order. And that's the kind of guy he was. And they talk about how there were several reporters who said, my first interview was with Coach Bowden, and he put me at ease. That was on ESPN this past weekend. They had a little highlight on him. It was amazing. And I'm going to tell you a story about Pat Williams. I was in Orlando when they were trying to get the franchise. And I put money down, for a seat that, when they actually came out with the prices, like, oh, there's no way I can afford this, because I was 23 or something, And I was so excited that the franchise was coming. And, this is way before internet. And somehow I got either Pat's number or the Magic's number. And I called Pat Williams for a job. I mean, I'm out of school just a couple of years. I have no experience. He takes the call. I'm talking to Pat Williams. I'm blown away. And so I'm telling him, and he's like, what's your experience? I'm like, well, I've got 3 years experience in marketing or whatever it was at the time. And he's like, well, I appreciate it, but, we really don't need those right now. And honestly, when I think back, how weird for me to call him. He's trying to build a franchise and I'm just this kid who has no idea what he's dealing with, but he took my call. So here's what the funny story is about Pat Williams. Maybe a week later, he calls me and he said, is this Rob Collins? I said, yeah. He goes, hey, it's Pat Williams at Magic. I'm like, hi. Like, I'm so excited. Like, he's offering me a job, like, whatever. And he's like, I'm returning your call. I'm like, oh, well, I called you about a job we talked about a week ago. And he goes, oh, okay. He goes, so we've already talked? I'm like, yeah. He goes, okay. He goes, I hadn't checked it off. He goes, but that's how detailed he was about
in
responding
his planner,
to,
I'm sure
in his Franklin plan, but he's responding to everybody. I'm just a kid looking for a job, and he's trying to line up corporate sponsors and everything else that goes along with, establishing a franchise. And I was always impressed with that. I was impressed that he was such a people person, right? Like a Bowden and kind of like you're saying, like Dean Smith. I've never met Dean Smith, but wow. I mean, what a great mentor, a great icon to learn under.
Yeah, no, he always super accessible, took those calls. Again, when my wife worked for him, no take a message, no Pat's out. If he was in, he was usually picking up the phone before my wife could. And what I would love is every day he would change his voicemail message with an inspirational quote. So you could just call him up and he would have guaranteed a different quote every day. And he would literally say, I'm going to write this down to my Franklin planner, write your number down, make sure you leave it twice. And he would call you back. He would return the call. So, he's been a real inspiration. Yeah. And he shared that wisdom through just so many great books. Done a fantastic job there. And just one of my favorite people to be around.
So when you're promoting a NBA entertainment experience, like you said, it's a couple hours of entertainment. What's the biggest challenge for you when the team is struggling, right? I mean, how do you keep the fan base engaged and coming out when the team, when the team's playing well, your job's probably a little easier. When the team's not playing well, what kind of levers or triggers do you pull?
Yeah, you still keep the big picture in mind. And one of the differences, between being, working for a company that owns facilities and promotes events as opposed to owning a team. When you own a team, when you're working for somebody like the Magic, you're really trying to create a relationship with the Orlando Magic brand. And so the players will change and the performance will ebb and flow, but you want people to feel a real affinity for the Magic brand. So, even when the team isn't good, you still want to, treat people well and customer service and, making sure that all those touch points are as positive as they can be so that even if people come and again, watch a team that maybe doesn't win a ton of games, they still feel like that was an enjoyable night out. I was with a community of people that I enjoyed, my fellow fans. I was treated well. I felt like I was a member of this tribe. And really creating that affiliation is really what you're trying to do. And are you providing quality entertainment? Are you, are you thinking about what is the music? What's the feel? What's the theme? Am I giving my sponsors? Am I creating entertaining contests to tie those feelings to a sponsor? Dance teams, mascots. We had 2 guys who'd come out and perform magic tricks. You had all kinds of things going on in Orlando. So again, and especially in Orlando, where you're competing with a wide variety of entertainment options, not just Disney, but I Drive, all the dinner theaters and shows and everything else. So you had to have a really high level, but thinking about it as a 2.5-hour entertainment experience, but something that somebody was going to come back to multiple times and really make you feel like they were part of this family, of this tribe, of this group of people who all shared their love for this team. And that's a little different than creating awareness and creating an experience for somebody who's coming to an event maybe once a year, which is more akin to what NASCAR is, a tour versus a team. And it's all sports, but it's a very subtle but different dynamic. But it all comes down to the experience that somebody has at the event.
Sure. So that's a good segue into Speedway Motorsports and what you're doing now. So talk to us a little bit about the scope of the company, the properties that you own and operate, and what your role is.
Sure. Well, we own 8 speedways, actually 9 speedways around the country, 7 of them which currently are active and hosting events. But we're based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we own Atlanta Motor Speedway, Bristol Motor Speedway in Tennessee, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, Texas, Las Vegas, Sonoma Raceway. We also own a track in Kentucky, about an hour south of Cincinnati, that currently does not host any NASCAR races. And then we also own a track about 45 minutes north of Charlotte here, North Wilkesboro Speedway. So these are basically motorsports-oriented facilities, but every day the electric meter is running. So what else can you do besides hosting major sporting events? So we have the Ford Performance Racing School is based here at Charlotte Motor Speedway. So if you buy a new Mustang, one of the perks you get is to be able to come and drive it here on our road course, and you're taught how to get the most out of it. We host. We had some folks go out to our track at Sonoma this past weekend and do a Tough Mudder event. We host concerts. We just try to look at ways to make our facilities multi-purpose beyond just racing events. How do we develop our real estate? We've got thousands of acres of land, and as crowd sizes have changed, how do you take that land and unlock that potential? How do you it's great places to host corporate events. So how do you create venues where somebody's in town for a convention in Las Vegas or here in Charlotte, down in Atlanta, they bring a group out and you create an experience for them. So that's a lot of it, and just making sure you're keeping the facilities up to date. Connectivity, Wi-Fi, all those types of things are questions that we're dealing with, and then you start looking at other bigger trends. Gambling, all those types of things that you start to look at. How do we incorporate that into our event experience? We do a lot of camping. That's a big differentiator. When you go to a Magic game, you're there for 3 hours. When you come to a race, you're there for 3 days, and and so people are camping. So you've got basically a small city living on your property. So how do you program entertainment? How do you make sure those folks, again, you're creating that community around the sport. In some of these cases, people have been coming and camping in these same spots or sitting in these same seats. We have a wall of people here in Charlotte who have been ticket holders for 50 or more years.
Oh my
So we've got
goodness.
about
Wow.
40 people who have grown up literally coming to these events. So there's a real passion for the sport. I think maybe college football may be the only other sport that's got the same level of passion that the NASCAR does. But we're really the event side of it. So whether the race is great or the race is kind of a blowout, how do you make sure that people come and have a great time and have great food? They get the information, they get the experience they want. They're comfortable. They've got clean bathrooms. They can get in and out quickly. The kind of the four T's of tickets, traffic, toilets, and tummies. Take care of those four things.
I've never heard that,
good.
but I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
But what a challenge, right? I mean, when I think, and correct me, because I don't know your business, but I think of, to your point, thousands of acres, huge facilities. And if you're having to keep them, technologically up to date, et cetera, for, a very small portion of the calendar year, frankly, right? I mean, you have these huge events, but I mean, I don't know what how many days you actually are, have large events at your facilities. How challenging is that for you all with that type of investment?
That's really where you have to get creative, because unlike a lot of venues, we get very little public funding because most of our fan base is coming from outside the area. So a politician isn't really excited about getting the vote of somebody from Pennsylvania who drove down to Charlotte for the race. There's a huge economic impact, but we get very little public money. So it's money that we're having to spend. And again, you're having to kind of create enough infrastructure to support, 50, 60, 70,000 people for a weekend, but then have that scale down to, where you may only have, 30 or 40 people on the property for a driving school or something along those lines. So we have to get very creative in how we put things together. We try to think broadly. How can we use assets in multiple places? And that even comes down to our people. And we really COVID kind of allowed us to rethink our business, as opposed to being 8 different active facilities with 8 independent staffs. How could we reshape the company to be one networked organization? And you had somebody who was really good in social media, who was just working in New Hampshire on one race a year. Well, how do we take that talent and allow that to be applied across 3 or 4 or 5 events? So we went through a big restructuring and kind of looked at a new model of how do we operate again more as a broadly distributed networked organization, as opposed to everybody sitting in their own separate silo. So that was a really, really good exercise, and we're still working through that, but so far it's worked really well for us.
Right, because you probably never might be a stretch, but rarely would have large events at multiple facilities in the same time. Is that fair?
Yeah, occasionally we do, but again, when you've got enough people, and again, there's something. The globe is kind of our symbol. So there's always some activity around the globe. So you may have a drag race and a NASCAR weekend, or you may have an IndyCar weekend, a NASCAR weekend, or you may be hosting a concert. But there's very few events that will require everybody in the whole network to be all pushing against the same objective. And a lot of people do have to be physically based. I mean, you can't mow the grass in New Hampshire from Las Vegas. So you've got operations teams that are really focused on the facilities there. But when you look at things like marketing and to some extent ticketing and finance, as we learned during the pandemic, you can do awful lot of jobs remotely. Yes. And we really were able to build up our remote muscles, and that kind of really unlocked the idea, like, we don't have to be geographically limited, that if somebody's got a great skill set, we can apply them to events from Sonoma, California to Concord, New Hampshire, even though they're sitting in Dallas, Texas.
Right. And as chief strategy officer, I would guess that's part of your responsibility, is to figure out how to maximize your assets throughout the year and do different things. What other kind of things are you thinking about or looking at?
Yeah, there's one family. We were a publicly traded company until about 2 years ago, and we went private. And the chief strategy hasn't changed, and that's to make as much money as you can, and be as profitable as you can. So spend a lot of time, looking at opportunities, looking at ways to manage the resources we have. And culture is something that's super important as well. And we've really kind of, in the past year, as we've kind of become one company, what do we really stand for, globally? And we spent a lot of time, and we've kind of boiled it down to what we call our principles, our values, and our practices. And, the principles are kind of the real guiding things that we go by. And we've got 4. And the first one is to take care of teammates. And you can't care for somebody unless you know them. So you've got to really know the people you're working with. And, a team, you're picked to be on a team. A lot of companies, a lot of things we talk about family, but you're born into a family.
Right.
And we may have a few family members that we wouldn't necessarily have on our team. So by looking at each other's teammates, is we've all been selected to play a role in this organization. Taking care of teammates is first and foremost. Secondly, be known for remarkable events. So being known is something that you don't control. We may think we're doing a great job, but unless our customers, unless our sponsors, feel like we're doing a great job and we're known for that, that's really what we're trying to do is please our fans, please our corporate clients. And remarkable events is literally events worthy of being remarked on. And now with social media, being able to remark on things is a huge benefit, that if people are sharing the great time they've had via the channels they have. It's not just telling your neighbor. Now it's going out to your audience of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands on social media. So be known for remarkable events. Third, it's positively impact our community. And one thing that we learned was people didn't understand what an asset that these facilities can be and what our people can be. So during COVID, we were testing people. We gave over 1.5 million vaccinations at our properties. We hosted high school graduations for people, in their cars. They drove start finish line, got the diploma. So really became a community asset. And then finally, profitably improve. If you don't then they have to work together. If you don't make a profit, you don't have a business. We want to constantly improve. But if you improve something that doesn't generate a profit, is it really an improvement? So we link those two together. So those are the 4 things we try to focus on and try to keep kind of people engaged, and then thinking about our actions, how do they fit into one of those 4 buckets? So that's really helped us all kind of bridge the gap of I work at Texas, or I work at Charlotte, or I work at Las Vegas. Now we're all part of one, the globe mentality. We call it generously lending our best efforts. So that's what we all want to do, is have that globe mentality. So whether we're working on something that's in our backyard or we're working on an event that's on the other side of the country, we want to give our best to whatever we're doing.
I love that. That's great. I love that you have these kind of founding principles that people can rally around. I also like how unique it is that you took your facilities and did different things. I mean, I love the graduation idea in the cars. That's really cool.
Yeah. Who knew that a car was a really great piece of personal protective equipment, and having concerts and drive-in movies, and the sport. Fortunately, NASCAR really took the opportunity to reset during the whole pandemic, and was one of the first sports back in actual action. We're able to carry our whole season, largely the second half of the season as scheduled. Everybody was compensated appropriately. There were no reduction in purses. All the drivers got what they were supposed to get. All the teams got. Thankfully, all the tracks got what they were supposed to get. So, we were able to sustain the business pretty well. And Sports Business Journal actually named NASCAR the League of the Year last year. And then, not to mention the work they did on the social justice front with eliminating the Confederate flag and bringing more people into the sport. That's you've got to continue to grow and evolve as culture evolves.
And how is the health of NASCAR, both in person and viewership on the networks?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we lack today in our era of hot takes is context. So you see a lot of things. Oh, this is down or that it's down, but relative to what? So you look at especially like television and viewership. Well, fewer people are watching TV in general, but we're still focused on ratings as opposed to focusing on share. So ratings is the number of total TVs, how many people are watching. Well, if there's less TVs on, then your ratings are naturally going to go down. But share is what percentage of people of their TV on are watching your content. So our share has continued to go up. NASCAR has actually held its own, been up small single digits. I think we're down about 5% over the last 5 years. But outside the NFL, that's the second best sport in the league. And you look at like prime time, that's down 40% overall. So at the big picture as a sport, I think the sport's doing really well. Still some of the largest sporting events in person that are held week in, week out. If you look at the television numbers, it's usually the number one or two sports event of the year. It's been really successful for Fox and NBC driving their cable business. And we're really excited about as we go to the Peacocks of the world and the Tubies of the world and the streaming services, but live sports content can continue to be a valuable part of that business. So we're excited about where it's going overall.
The conversation continued with Mike for quite a while, so we'll have part 2 next week right here on the Marketing Chief Podcast. We'll talk about esports and e-racing, people that have been influential in his life, and what it means to have a personal board of directors. That's next week on the Marketing Chief Podcast. If you like what you hear on the Marketing Chief Podcast, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Marketing Chief Podcast.